Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're located. My name is Alex, and I'm glad to welcome you all back. If you already attended my webinars, if not, then hi for the first time. Please drop something in the chat, like maybe a number five or exclamation mark or at, so I know that I'm perfectly audible, visible, and you can see my screen. Thank you, Kashif. So um, let us continue then. Right. So today we are going to have an introduction to OpenNebula operations. Pretty much what you need to know to start running your OpenNebula environment. So please know that this session is being recorded. So in case you've missed something, then you always can go back and watch the recording. If you're following along, then that is the right moment to connect to your OpenNebula instance. If no, once again, the session is being recorded, so you can check this one out and try to follow along the recording. Okay, so what is our agenda for today? We are going to talk about the Sunstone, so what the Sunstone is, uh, where, so how to access that, and so on and so forth. Then we are going to talk about the settings, so some user settings that you can configure. We are going to talk about virtual networks and adjust the built-in virtual network that was created using the mini one. Then we talk about marketplace and apps, cover the virtual machine templates, and we will end up with deploying a virtual machine. As usual, questions in the chat are very welcome. So feel free to ask the questions about this training in the chat. I'll answer them once we are going to be closer to the end of this session. So first thing first, the Sunstone. So what the Sunstone is, that is the graphical user interface. So that is one of the ways how we can interact with OpenNebula. The obviously there is the command line, so you can operate OpenNebula relying on the command line, and it's very easy actually to do, and it's like very comfy. However, sometimes you like the graphical user interface, and we have this one as well. This being called Sunstone. So it depends on the version, but I assume that we are running the latest 7.0 version. Then the graphical user interface looks very modern. And if it's not going to be proxied, or if you haven't altered anything, then it listens on 2616 TCP. It has the built-in MFA, so you can enroll your one-time passcode MFA application, and yeah, so pretty much have another layer of security. And the only thing you need to is something that can scan the QR code and generate this one-time passcode. And it's the same entry point for the administrators, for group administrators, for the users, cloud users. The view is going to be slightly different, so what they are going to see when they log in. But all in all, the entry point is the same, which is good because you're not running multiple graphical UIs for various purposes. Now, if we will look uh, on the if we connect to the IP address of my um, OpenNebula, then you can see that there is the username and the password prompt, and then you just can sign in. So I haven't enrolled any MFA to this environment. That's why I'm not going to be prompted to enter any passcode. However, what are we going to use is the one admin user, right? And you're supposed to grant the password or provide the password when you've deployed the OpenNebula with Mini One. Alternatively, if you don't remember your password or you've lost it, and you have access to the OpenNebula's command line, you always can go and cat a file as the one admin. Obviously, you can do it as root as well, but then you will need to write the full path. So you go to one and then one auth file. So you cat it and you see your username and you can see your password from that user. So by default, that's what is there. So in case you forgot, that is the way how to remind yourself uh, how your password looks like. Okay, so you've just logged in, and that is the Sunstone. So it welcomes you with a few shortcuts so you can quickly jump into the images, to the VM templates, to virtual networks, and list all your VMs. Obviously, you can switch between the night mode and between the day mode, or the bright and dark theme. Again, up to you. I prefer the bright one when I'm showing something, so I will continue with this one. But again, this is totally up to you. Now, next, that are the views. So considering that we are one admin, and one admin is the top of the food chain, so one admin cannot be restricted, has access to everything. That's pretty much the god mode in the OpenNebula environment. So by default, one admin user has access to all of so-called views. Now, depends on how you create your users, they are going to have an access to less number of views, most likely cloud and user, or even just cloud. So the idea of a view that it declutters the interface. So let's say I can give an admin view to a regular user. However, a regular user has no access to something like access control lists. And then when user will try to access this tab, naturally, the user is going to get an error. So to avoid this page to be even shown, or this tab to be even shown to a user who should not have access there, uh, there are these simplified views. So let's compare it. We start with admin. Once again, one admin by default has the default view of the admin view, and that pretty much access to every single tab, every single place and corner of the OpenNebula environment. Now let's switch to the cloud view. So first you can note on the left, there is less number of tabs that you can access, right? So only a certain uh, and that's it. And also, the dashboard has been changed. So instead of having shortcuts to quickly access VMs, networks, and so on, you're presented with the CPU, memory, disks, networks, the host monitoring, and the host memory monitoring. So once again, it gives you the data you actually care about and removes the things that you don't care about, being just a cloud user, or the things that you don't have access to. Then we can go to the user view, which gives you already a bit of more um, access. And then we have the group admin that again grants you with even more access. And we end up back to the admin view with all the bells and whistles available. Now, what I would like to say though, as you can see, I'm one admin, right? So I'm the top of the top here in this environment. I can give like switch to the cloud view. That just limits what I can have as the access in my Sunstone, but it's not going to revoke any actual permissions, right? So permissions are depending on my type of the user and the group membership. So let's say if I'm one admin and I revoke myself from any other view but the cloud view, I still can have and have access to the command line. I still can do, let's say, one VNet list and list all of the virtual networks, right? So consider that the rights are managed separately and the views are there to declutter the interface. Obviously, if you are planning to create your own views, you can do it, right? So these, and actually, you also can adjust the default views. Although I don't like to change the default things, I like them to stay as is. And if I need to, I can just clone the existing one and adjust it the way I need, and just name it as, for example, admin v2 or cloud user, whatever. So you can create your own views and adjust the existing ones, although it's not the graphical UI task. You actually need to go into the command line and configure it from there. I would refer you to documentation if you'd like to do so, because I mean, it's not a rocket science. You will be able to do it pretty much quickly, as we have described it step by step. However, so you know, it's the command line task, not the graphical UI task. Okay, so we've landed here. Every user, doesn't matter what kind of view the user has the settings menu. So if you go to the settings menu, from there you can configure, first of all, the theme mode. So either explicitly dark, light, or just follow the system. So again, I'm staying with the light. Then the data tables and their style. So either you would like them to be in the card mode or you prefer lists. So number of rows you would like to have per page, basically the pagination, as well as should you look at the info tables straightly as the full screen info, or you would like them to be opened on the same screen. So some kind of add-ons and some kind of customizations that you can configure to make yourself a little bit more comfortable, as well as the thing called default view. So if user has more views available, for example, like we with our one admin, we have user, we have group admin, cloud, and admin. You can set a specific view to be the default view for the user. So one admin naturally has the default view of the admin, and that is how it is by default. Again, you can adjust it. Then in the security, obviously you may try to change your password. However, for one admin, changing the password is prohibited from the web UI, so you would need to change it via the command line. But what is important here is the secure shell public key. So the secure shell public key is added to your user, and then this secure shell public key will be inherited by your virtual machine that you've deployed. So once you deploy the VM to the authorized keys, your secure shell public key is going to be added, and you will be able to access your virtual machine via the secure shell using your private key. It's very handy, and when you install Mini1, then you have one added by default. Although you always can change it should you need to and add more. And as well as configure a token and also register the MFA. So if you need to, then feel free to enroll the MFA. Right. So these are your, excuse me, these are your user settings. Another thing, what is worth to mention are labels. So first of all, we kind of reworked the labeling approach in the version 7.0. So it comes with a bit more handy labels, and you can create the user labels. You also can add group labels. But labels, pretty much what you can do, you can label the resource and then use these labels in the filtering, so only to show the resources that are labeled in a certain way. So once again, something that can make your life slightly easier when you have multiple virtual machines running, and you like just to have a selection of a few instead of the whole thing. Okay, so it's fun to have OpenNebula, right? But without networking, your virtual machines are, well, most of the time useless. You cannot access the network, you cannot access the resources on the network, and so on and so forth. So by default, out of the box, OpenNebula supports multitude of standards. So we are supporting the .1q VLAN, we are supporting the extended VLAN, also known as VXLAN, in the various modes. We also support the Open Virtual Switch and the implementation of Open vSwitch with the VXLAN, and simple bridge that you just hook up to the interface, and that's it. Now, the another thing with networking is that we have the concept of security groups, which acts as the host level firewall. So if you are planning to utilize that, then you would need to go with bridge with security groups, VXLAN, or .1q type of the interface. So the simple bridge or OVS implementation at the moment doesn't support these security groups. There's also a bit of a self-service, so you can create network templates and then let your users to create their own networks with predefined settings. As well as you can reserve a chunk of the network and make it as the child network. So all your networks can be managed from the networks virtual networks tab, and then you have the default virtual network already there. So if you installed from Mini1, you are going to have this network. This network has a label FW, which stands for the firewall, which is basically bridge with security group type of a network. So you can click create and name it the way you wish. So my new network as the example, right? And now you're presented with the virtual network settings. So it has configuration, has addresses, security, and so on. So first thing first, you need to pick up the driver, or basically the type of the network. By default, it's bridged, and I'm going to create a bridged network. Another thing here is that for bridged and bridged with security groups implementation, you can actually enable the private host networking. So this one stays on the host and it is not going to go outside of the environment, outside of the host. That is the idea. Now, as you can see, as soon as I toggle the switch, some of the uh, some of the configurations disappeared. Like, as you can see, the physical device disappears. Why? Because your virtual network is supposed to be hooked to some kind of a physical network interface. For example, ETH0. So this one's going to, so you will have a bridge that hooked up to this ETH0. But if we are speaking of the private host networking, we actually don't need this one because there's not going to be a routable subnet, right? So you can turn it off. as well as you can use the custom name for the bridge, and you can pre-create a bridge, and that would be the advisable way to go. So you create a bridge manually, and then hook your interface to hook your virtual network to that bridge. Now, once again, it depends on your environment which way you would like to go. So either bridge security groups, .1q, VXLAN, so on and so forth. For the sake of simplicity, I will just simply create the private host networked bridge. Now, the important part obviously is to select the correct virtual network type or the driver, but not least important part is the addresses tab. So you see, you must when you put a virtual network card in that network, you must hand over some kind of address. And this address could be the IP address, or it could be a simple MAC address. But some kind of address supposed to be attached to this virtual network card. So once again, depends what are you planning to go to, how you are planning your setup. You may want to distribute the IP address and configure this IP address inside a VM using the OpenNebula, right? So then you're supposed to define the IP range and the size of the network. Or if you're planning to use the external DHCP, you may just simply go with the ATH, so Ethernet type of a network. Just simply distribute MAC addresses and then put your virtual network in the DHCP mode. So again, depends how you would like to proceed. So I will set the IPv4 to something like 192.168.62, and then I will set the size of network to, let's say, 10. Now, if let's say you're planning your network and you have something in the middle, right? So, for example, starting from this one, I would like to add 20 IP addresses to this network, but I know that, let's say, IP address of like the 13 is occupied with, I don't know, router, maybe some kind of a service, maybe some kind of a physical device, maybe access point, whatever. But I know that it's, so this one is already assigned somewhere, and it's literally very painful to move it to any other network or even change the IP address. So, how I can work around this one? So, the correct way would be to grant, let's say, 10 IP addresses, right? So, it would be, and then create another address range, let's say 14, and then give 10 IP addresses starting from the 14. So this is how I'm kind of mitigating that 13th IP address, because it's occupied and I have multiple ranges, and you can have multiple ranges in the end of the day attached to your network. Under the security groups, you will need to select the security groups that are going to be in use in this network. So the default one, which is right here, it allows everything in and everything out, and it's quite permissive. If you are planning to use your custom security groups, then most of the time you don't want to have the default security group attached, because otherwise it kind of ruins uh, all your firewalling. So just so you know, the default is there that allows all the traffic. Quality of service, so if you would like to adjust it, once again, you can do it right here. And then the very important part of it is the context tab. So the context tab defines the gateway So you assign the specific gateway, like for example, 192.168.60.1, and you also set the DNS for your service, for your network. Now that might be it, but not. So again, depends how you're planning to attach the IP addresses or assign or configure the IP addresses of your virtual machine. You may want to adjust the method. By default, the method will take the IP address from here, let's say, and will configure this IP address on the VM, right? As easy as it is. And the type of the uh, networking on that card is going to be static. However, if you're planning to use the external DHCP, you would need to change the IP assignment method to the DHCP. So then this one's going to configure your network card of inside a VM, will set it to DHCP mode or dynamic mode, and you will get the uh, IP address from your external DHCP. If you're not planning to use any external DHCP, then you can clean this one up and just go with the built-in options. Also, you may want to completely skip the IPv4 assignment, then you'll just hand over the MAC address and you are not going to configure any IPv4 on that target virtual machine. Again, whatever floats your boat is the way to go. Just make sure it's aligned with the deployment strategy. Otherwise, you may hand over the IP addresses that are from the wrong network, or maybe even duplicate IP addresses could be configured. So plan your network upfront. So as you can see, the network has been created and it is ready to be used. I can update it at any given time if I need to, right? So I can go add another range or change its settings once again if I need to. Now, one thing, if you are following along, then by default, the attribute for the DHC for the DNS on the built-in virtual network is 172.16.101. I don't know where you host your environment, but in my case, some of the providers, they don't like when you spawn some kind of a DNS server there. So I would like to change that instead to 1111 instead of being the 172.16.101. So that's probably something that you would like to adjust if you're using something like, I don't know, Scaleway, maybe Ionas, whatever. Once again, not all of them like when you spin your DNS server there. All right. So the virtual network is there. Once again, you can create network from template, so you can predefine everything starting from the virtual machine, virtual network driver, down to the IP address space, down to the DHCP, and other like the methods how you distribute IP addresses using the template. Or alternatively, you also can create a reservation. So the reservation is when you reserve a chunk of the network from the main parent network. So for example, I will take this one and we'll create a reservation. We'll reserve 10 IP address and we'll pick this range. Now what happens is I'm going to have a new network with exactly the same settings. So this one actually going to inherit vary the same settings from my parent network, and it is going to reserve 10 IP addresses starting from the lowest one. So the first one was 172.16.102, then 10 IP addresses from there. As you can see, the parent network now has 10 IP addresses reserved, right? So if I'm going to the leases, terribly sorry, there was an ambulance passing by and was quite loud, so I decided to mute myself. So if you are going to look at the leases, you will see that the IP addresses are now reserved and reserved to a specific network with the ID of 2. So what happens here is that I can no longer delete this network, right? So if I will try to delete it, I'll get an error, right? Because if you have at least one lease in that network, you cannot remove it, right? So this network becomes pretty much safe from the deletion or locked out from the deletion until you are going to delete the reservation and also delete all the virtual machines or remove all the virtual network cards from this network. Additionally, if you know that you have some kind of IP address that suddenly became occupied, for example, the second one, you can hold this IP. So you enter the IP address, press hold IP button, and this one becomes placed on hold, right? And then this IP address is not going to be provided to any network reservation or any virtual machine that you're deployed, that you are going to deploy. So keep in mind, if you need to do something like that, then there is the built-in functionality for this. Good. So virtual network is adjusted or created the way you wish. Now, what is the point having all your virtual networks without having any virtual machine running? Now, in order to deploy a virtual machine, you firstly need to get a few things: the image and the template. So you see um, the image that you will use, it's just a snapshot of a disk. So in OpenNebula, you're not going to deploy a virtual machine from an image, right? You are going to deploy virtual machine from the VM template. However, virtual machine template contains these references to an image because on its own, virtual machine template is just a set of variables, right? With references to the virtual networks or images or some resource fine tunings that you are planning to use. Same time, you will need to get those images somewhere, especially because the question is what makes an image the Open Nebula image, right? So that is the biggest question. And what makes it the Open Nebula image is the tiny layer of contextualization. So an add-on to the operating system that allows us to configure your virtual machine. Let's say set the network, right? So configure the network settings and so on and so forth. So you need that contextualization package to be in. Now, you can build your image from scratch. It's completely doable, and there is a very, well, say, easier way to do it using the One Apps repository. However, if you're looking for a vanilla OS without any add ons, then, well, look no more. We have the official marketplace. So, marketplace is like the place that hosts ready to use images that you can just download and deploy. And these are made to work in the OpenNebula environment. Marketplaces can be public, can be private. So we are hosting our own public marketplace with a lot of operating systems and some applications there. So you can just go and download it from there. However, you also may want to keep your private marketplace if you wish to. So, how to first of all access your marketplace configurations? It's right here under the marketplaces tab. We have the Linux containers. So this one is for the LXC. If your hosts are configured to run the Linux containers hypervisor, then you can go with this one. Otherwise, the OpenNebula public marketplace is configured there. We also have the community marketplace, so you can find how to add the community marketplace as well. But for now, let's look at the OpenNebula public marketplace. Now, all the images that you can get from the marketplace are going to be located under the apps tab. So you go there and you can find all of these images that you can download. So for example, let me look for, let's say Ubuntu 2404. So I have two type of images. One is for x64 and one is for Arch64 architecture. And I can import that onto into my OpenNebula environment. Now, just hit the import button, and here's the thing. So as I mentioned before, you need an image, right? It's a snapshot of a disk, but on its own, image is basically useless without the virtual machine template, because you need to, when you deploy a VM, you need to tell the resources that's going to be allocated, the images that must be linked to this virtual machine, the network settings, placement, like a lot of stuff, right? So you need that virtual machine template. So to make your life easier, majority of images that we have in our public marketplace are bundled with this virtual machine template. So you can export the virtual machine template along with the image itself. Now, then you need to pick up where to place this image. Now, OpenNebula has three types of data stores. There is the system data store, image data store, and the files data store. So the system data store is going to hold your images while your virtual machines are running. The image data store is going to store your images at rest. So eventually, when you are planning to upload any image, either from your computer, from anywhere on the network, or from the marketplace, you must place this image onto the image data store and click finish. So now OpenNebula is going to download and place this image onto the data store. So if we look at the images, you can see that image currently is locked, so in the process of being downloaded. However, if we will go to virtual machine templates, you can see that VM template is already there. So the difference is, once again, that the VM template is a bunch of text, right? So the variables with the certain mappings, and getting it is very easy, while the image itself is the actual snapshot of a disk. And this one, it will require a bit of a time to get downloaded, depends on the speed of your disks and depends on the how fast your network is. To show what to demonstrate what I'm saying, we can use one template show 0 as the example. So this one will output the information about my template as well as the template context. And as you can see, that is the template, just a bunch of correctly configured variables. So what I can do, actually, I can copy, paste it into a file and create a virtual machine template from this file, right? So Again, if it's something that you would like to do, feel free to go that route. Okay, so the virtual machine uh, image is now ready, and that means that I can start deploying my virtual machines using this image. However, before we deploy any virtual machine, we need to speak about virtual machine template. As I mentioned before, virtual machine template is going to contain the reference to the images that are going to be part of this virtual machine. That is also going to contain reference to your virtual network cards that you are going to attach, and then other parameters. So consider this as the blueprint. So sometimes when you deploy a virtual machine, you can change some of the settings. It depends on how your virtual machine template is configured. But for example, you can add more memory, you can extend the disk, and so on and so forth. However, once the virtual machine deployed, it goes into the possession of that user, of the owner of that virtual machine. And from that point, the virtual machine owner, if there is the right view assigned to this user, the virtual machine owner can reconfigure the virtual machine. So change some of the settings that were not there during the instantiation. So just something to be aware of, that when you deploy a virtual machine, then it goes, with a specific number of settings. Now, once the virtual machine deployed, given the right circumstances and the right view, user has access to almost every piece of that virtual machine. And then there is a thing called service, which is the multi VM deployment. And the multi VM deployments are also going to rely on these virtual machine templates, right? So the virtual machine template is a very important piece of that puzzle. Your virtual machine templates are under, well, virtual machine templates tab, and you can create new one if you wish from scratch. Right, you can clone the existing one. So virtual machine template contains these references to images, and multiple virtual machine templates can actually use the same image but just be with different settings. So, what you should be aware of is that if you're cloning the virtual machine template, it's going to be cloned without any images. So, it's going to refer very the same image as the original one. If you are going to tick this checkbox, then it's also going to clone with the actual image, right? So, keep that in mind. Now you can see that the copy of the virtual machine template has been created. And if we go to images, you can see that there is also a copy of the disk, of the OS disk that was attached to this virtual machine template. So something again just to keep in mind. And yeah, so obviously it's up to you, but by default, cloning, and that also refers to the command line. If you are going to clone the virtual machine template, it's just going to clone the template and the um, not the image itself. Now, another difference is that once you instantiated the VM, so you already have the virtual machine, the relationships between the virtual machine template and the VM are done. So these are nowhere related to each other anymore. When it comes to image, however, it still kind of has this relationship with the virtual machine. So you can delete any virtual machine template. However, if you have a VM running from with this image attached, you cannot delete this image. Right. So again, keep that in mind, that if you have at least one VM using this image, the image is protected from the deletion. Okay, so here we go. We have the Alpine Linux. Let us update the Alpine Linux template. Let's have a look what we can adjust here. So obviously, the most important things, we can change the memory. Let's say from 256, set it to 512. We can change the physical CPUs that we are going to assign to this virtual machine, as well as adjust the number of the virtual CPUs that's going to be there. You can also enable the hot resize if you need to, and also set, for example, the memory modification uh, as the range. So instead of allowing your user during the instantiation to input any value, you can set the minimum value and the maximum value. And then the user will be presented with a slider, so can move that slider. You can instantiate this virtual machine on behalf of a user. Let's say I have a user, Joan, and I would like to deploy a virtual machine on behalf of Joan. And you also can calculate the monetary value of running this virtual machine. So you can calculate the costs of memory running this VM, the physical CPU costs of running this VM, and the disk costs of running this VM. For example, like this one, maybe, right? So to when it comes to memory, then let's say this to run the CPU, and let's say this one for the disks, right? So in the end of the day, you would be able to calculate the accounting report and see how much this user or user group owes you in the monetary value. Right. So then we go to the settings for your future VM. So, for example, you can attach more disks. So, because, well, the image is a snapshot of a disk. It might be the bootable OS, but at the same time, it might be an empty data block, or it may be a disk with some kind of a data that you need to work with. So, all that can be attached as an image. What else you can do? Let's say my initial image is 512 megs. That's fine for storing, but let's say it's probably not enough to run any kind of heavy application. So what you can do, you can scale it, you can make it like higher. So you can go and let's say add another zero here, and then instead of having 512 megs, this one's going to be 5 gigs. Consider that once deployed, you can scale it, right? So you can scale this image up. However, you cannot scale it down, right? So you can only increase this value. So make it uh, make it reasonably sized in the first place. So then attaching to a network, and you can attach to multiple networks. Also, what you can do, you can create an alias. So alias, let's say if you don't want to attach two networks in the same two virtual network cards and place them to the same network, you may just simply create an alias, and this one's going to give you a secondary IP address and will configure it to the same network card. So again, whatever is up, whatever you wish, but if you need this functionality, then it is there. As well as you can just simply edit and just select a different network if you wish to, then feel free to do that. Right, so the OS and CPU PCI devices can be configured right here. If you would like to change the VNC, so the way how you can access the terminal of your VM, then there is the input and output setting. The one thing that you may want to actually adjust is the key map. So you may want to pick your keyboard layout. I'm using the US International, so to me it's fine to keep it as is. But yeah, so you can set the one that you wish. And another very interesting one is the context, right? So the context helps you to set or to modify your virtual machine during the deployment phase and also during the running phase. So first thing first is obviously the public key. Now, by default, it is going to refer the user's public key. So the owner of that virtual machine is going to um, have the access SSH. Uh, so you will be able to have the access to your virtual machine by the secure shell. So what you can do here, you can add more. So you can add other SSH public keys that you may want to be there. Again, this one is for the deployment. Given that the user is going to have the user view, then the owner of this virtual machine will be able to change the secure shell public key. Now, then, if you are planning to execute a script on the startup, whatever it is, it may be an update, it may be some kind of setting some kind of configuration. Again, whatever you need, you can place it right here. And then this set of commands, this script is going to get executed every time a virtual machine boots. That includes the reboots and that includes the initial deployment. Once again, giving that the user has the right view, the user owner will be able to change the start script. You can have the user inputs if you wish, but that is completely different topic. What else is very interesting is the context custom variables. So the contextualization package is going to configure your virtual machine according to some specific rules. So we have the uh, built-in variables that are going to configure your virtual machine in a certain way. There is an article in the documentation covering all possible ones, but for sake of simplicity, I will show a few right now. So, for example, first one is set underscore host name. So this one's going to set the host name of the virtual machine. Now, it can be a combination of the hard coded string and the dynamic string. So, for example, I can say that this is Alpine and then refer the username, right? So, this one is going to set the host name to my virtual machine as Alpine dash. And if I'm going to instantiate this one, Alpine dash one admin. Another, it might be the time zone. So this one's going to trigger the time zone change. And for example, Europe, Riga. So this one's going to set the time zone, given that this is the correct way how to define the time zone. Otherwise, it's going to fall back on whatever is the default. And I think default was the UTC. So we have a bunch of these. And same as, for example, the password, you can set it to something like OpenNebula. So right now it's in clear text. However, once deployed, once saved, is no longer be in the clear text. So no worries. Okay, so this one is configured. The context is configured, and the template is saved. So what we should do next, we should deploy a couple of VMs and see how they will look once we are going to deploy them, right? So, excuse me, virtual machines, you can deploy them as the single VM or deploy them in batches, right? These can be accessed from the Sunstone via the VNC, uh, given that you have all the right configuration set. And any virtual machine can be backed up. You can turn the virtual machine disk into an image if you would like to reuse them with any other future VMs. And yep, so you can operate your virtual machine the way you need, like power down, resume, put on pause, or terminate. Again, given that you have the right access to that. So to deploy a VM, you can kind of use the template view, or you can go directly to instances VMs, click plus, select the template, and it just brings you to the same view, to the same page as you would do this from the VM template. Now set the number of instances, and let's say I'm going to deploy 3 instances. Right. Then I would like to set the VM name. So for example, Alpine. And then, yeah, let it just be Alpine. Right. So next I can scale a little bit or change the storage. I can change the network. I can change the placement and define some rules where this virtual machine must be deployed. I can create some scheduled actions, like, for example, scheduled snapshots or scheduled reboots. And I can change the OS booting. So pick up the bootable disk image if I need to. As you can see, nothing regarding the context, right? So the contextualization stuff was configured at the template level and cannot be changed during the instantiation. So then I click finish and off we go. You can see that the currently virtual machines are in the process of being deployed. They already got their IP address and MAC address assigned, and also the resources. Now, after a couple of refreshes, you can see that 2 of these were already deployed and 1 currently still in the process of deployment. So what you can do with this virtual machine, you can access the storage, take a snapshot, save as a disk, resize this one, right? You can change the networks. You can create a snapshot of the full VM, right? And you can also change or update the configuration. Remember I told you? So you can update, let's say, the start script. You can change the secure shell public key should you need to, as well as change these context variables like time zone, like the password, and so on and so forth. So this will trigger a specific procedure within the virtual machine to reconfigure the VM. What else you can do from here? You can access the virtual machine via the VNC, and this one's going to open the VNC connection to the virtual machine. So as you can already find that the host name was set correctly, and the password should be OpenNebula to access the virtual machine. So as you can see, I've logged in as root, and I can access the command line of my virtual machine. Once again, should you, for example, forget the password, no worries. Go to configuration, click update the configuration, go to the context, expand it, locate the password variable, and change it, for example, to Alpine, and apply these changes. So now you can see that virtual machine will go through the reconfiguration stage, and you will be able to access it using this password. By default, all the virtual machine images coming from the marketplace are going to be deployed without any password. So if you haven't set this variable, then password is not configured at all, so you cannot log in without a password using the VNC. However, you still can access it using the secure shell. Again, should you need to. Right. And then, yeah, as I mentioned, then there are other ways how you can manage your VM. And let's say if I'm going with the cloud view and I will open the cloud view, you can see that what I can do, I can scale or resize my storage. I can change the network settings. I can take snapshots of the VM. However, I cannot access the context, right? So if your users are going to have the cloud view, they are quite limited what they can do with the actual VM, even though they are considered as the owner of that virtual machine. At least the user view must be added so the user can access the context or virtual machine configuration and also access the backupping and view the template itself. And if you need to destroy these VMs, just mark them, go and click terminate hard, and this one's going to wipe them out completely as if they never existed. Right. So that is going to be it from the demonstration side. So let's look at the questions. Okay, we do have quite of these. So the vCenter integration is available in 6.10, although it's hidden from the initial view. You need to explicitly enable it in the 1d.conf. So I would refer you to documentation to have a look how to enable that. But it is there. It's just not enabled by default. By default. Okay. So you can manage your virtual machines using the vCenter integration, right? So it is possible. But our main focus is KVM, so we are looking forward to focus on the KVM. That's why the kind of vCenter is not our top of the priority. However, 610 is LTS, and the vCenter integration is going to be supported for the whole lifetime of the 6.10. Considering the um session for complete integration with the vCenter, I would request to contact our sales team so they can organize a private session for you on that topic. Hope I've answered all your questions. If you have any other questions, then let me know in the chat. Also, it's worth to mention that we have forums. So in case you have any struggles with OpenNebula that you cannot resolve yourself, then feel free to check out the forum. Might be it's worth asking there, or your question or your struggle might already have been resolved by our community members or our engineers that are hanging around the forum. So feel free to participate in the discussions there. Don't forget, we have a bunch of other webinars coming. So some of these are training webinars, some of these are product webinars. So feel free to sign up for the ones that that you feel are beneficial and interesting. For example, some of these are going to be about the sneak peek of the upcoming functionality. Some of these are talking about a specific topic like migration and specific aspects of the OpenNebula, so specific features. So I would highly recommend these webinars delivered by my colleagues. Aside from that, there are panel discussions and a lot more. And obviously, if you would like to get a training certification, then feel free to attend our public classes that we run on scheduler, or alternatively, you may have a private session just for you and your team. So feel free to contact our sales guys and girls. Yeah, feel free. 6.10 is integratable with the vCenter. So, yeah. And once again, I mentioned it's LTS, so it's not going away anytime soon. Right. If we don't have any other questions, then thanks for attending. See you again soon. Same place, same time, just a different date. And obviously, a different topic. Thank you, and bye bye.